Hi, friends and family,
Welcome to Hope After Addiction
with your host, Katie Comer.
and Chelsea McLeod.
Hi, welcome to Hope After Addiction. We're so happy that you've joined us today. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I missed y'all.
We're really glad to have you back. We've missed you too.
Yeah, if you haven't gone to see the last couple of episodes, we had a special guest, Melissa. She's been on before. It was beautiful. Talked about grief. In different ways, and go back and watch those. But I really appreciate y'all stepping in and doing those. But I did miss you. But I really enjoyed my vacation.
Hey, was it fun?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. Beach days are the best days. It's so fun. We had a really good time. The weather was perfect. We went to the Gulf, and it was just really, really pretty. So
nice. Peaceful.
it was peaceful. I will say though. And I'll show some pictures. It was, we'll make sure to put those pictures up, but it was rough. I think that's on the news right now, how rough some of like the
Rip currents and stuff.
currents and undertows and all that stuff are. And my dad went with us, and he's like the daredevil getting out there and took
Really?
Eli out there with him. And I was like, just make sure you're safe. He would
kidding.
guard him with his life. But I was just like, you just watch those. It's like red flags. And then a few days were like double red flags where they would fine people for getting in. So,
Oh my goodness.
and then there's just some of those people, not my dad, but some of those people that just get in,
Test the boundaries.
they get in trouble.
Yeah.
So, but we had a really good time. It was
Good.
really fun.
That's such a necessary thing.
I know. And those pictures, man, beach pictures are the best.
Oh, they're the sweetest.
So I'll show those to you. But I missed y'all, but I'm excited to be back. Today we're going to be talking about just really coming before the Lord and saying, your will be done. Your will be done. But do you really mean that?
Yeah.
You know? It's easy enough to say. And I remember specifically, it's a part of my testimony. It's a big part of my testimony. And saying Adam was in rehab at the time and not really knowing where our relationship stood in those moments and saying, God, your will be done. Whatever that looks like, if that means us staying together and living our life, pouring into you and working this out and using this as our story, your will be done. Yeah. If this means that Adam never finds freedom from this addiction and we separate, we divorce, your will be done. And whatever that looks like in my life, in my testimony, I will still continue to follow you. And I really do believe, and I know, I don't believe, I know that I meant it.
Yeah.
But what does that really look like in your life? Like, really?
Yeah. It's a hard one. And
I
it
know.
comes with the full surrender.
I know. And go back and watch that episode too. Our surrender episode I think is my favorite. It's just so fun because it's just such a huge part of our stories. But yeah, it brings you back to fully surrendering and saying your will be done.
Yeah.
But do you mean it?
So, do you mean it?
That's good.
Yeah. And I think on this side of our stories, it's easier to be like, yes, I'm so glad we surrendered to his will.
Yeah.
Was there a fight inside of it? Yes. It was fear. It was unknown. It was, but when you come to that surrender moment,
right.
submitting to his will, whatever that looks like, it's a precious place to be.
Yeah.
And on the other side of it, it's kind of that silver lining that we can see how good his will was compared to ours.
Because it might be very different.
Yeah.
You thought it would be.
Well, yeah, because
it is for me.
Yeah. And we never dreamed of this life, that life. We never
Yeah.
dreamed we would walk through something like that, but we did. And because of it, I know my relationship with Christ is unlike anything that it would have been.
It makes you trust in God more when it just kind of works out on the other side, whatever that looks like for you, and for me, I left Knoxville. So, when Adam told me to pray about coming on staff at S2L over 10 years ago, I was like, I'll pray about it for 3 days. It's like my church answer. I was like, but no, that means moving to Middle Tennessee. And that's a for sure no.
Yeah.
And so I left my Vols and I'm going to stay in Knoxville and I'm going to cheer for the Vols. So that's not going to happen because whatever you're saying, this is more important.
Yep. Now you're cheering for freedom.
That's true.
You know?
And cheering for the Vols and at a distance.
Still, that's
so.
right. Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yes.
But I would have never, even thought to consider it. And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely prayed about it. And then a part of my testimony is my boss came and said, you get a promotion
Yep.
if you move to Middle Tennessee. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
you know.
It.
And
Okay,
so
God.
his will was a whole lot better than mine because when I look back on Adam and I still talk about it, and I'm sure you and John
Yeah.
do too, just sitting down on the couch together going, our life, man. Like I would have never, but God.
It is crazy. I say it all the time, sitting in church in the middle of a cornfield in the middle of Tennessee.
Yeah, it's
And
true.
sometimes we'll look at
It
each other and
is
we're
true,
like,
though.
how did we get here?
Yeah.
You know, and
In the
it's
middle of a
just,
cornfield.
yes.
It's true, though.
I mean, it's crazy how God,
I know.
you know, and from a man who said he would never be in a landlocked state because he's a 2-ton captain.
Yeah, he
God's
is,
like, oh,
though.
yes, you will.
Don't
Let
ever
me
say
teach you.
never.
That's right. But God's will is always best. And the fact that our most spiritual lessons don't come from a perfect life. And I think that's hindsight when we can see that God does know best. And I used to say, I've said it on here before, but I used to joke with God, but can I just get a trailer of my life? Just like
yeah.
a movie trailer. I just want
Yeah.
to see like the beginning, the end, just little pieces of the middle. But we couldn't handle that. And that's why it comes to us in doses where that surrender of saying, God, your will, not mine, whatever that looks like, I'm going to trust you and I'm going to walk in that and trust you in the middle, which is the hardest part.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, it's a continuation too. I mean, your life, it's a continual prayer.
Yeah.
So although that was a huge part of my life, saying, your will be done, Lord, whatever that looks like, that was a huge moment in my life. It's still a continual prayer for mine. Now that Adam and I are where we are, we seem to be kind of like just in it, right?
Yeah.
And so we have our kids, we have our careers, we have our podcast. Go check out Life After Addiction. That's my husband's podcast. So so we seem to be like in the moment and like, this is it. This is our life. But no, it's a continual prayer. So as I was preparing kind of for this, I was like, you're right. Like, what does 10 years down the road look like?
Yeah.
It's a continual prayer saying, your will be done. And what does that look like? And yeah.
It's so good. And I was reading just in Matthew about when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane preparing for crucifixion, and he went off to pray 3 times. And 2 of those times he said, Lord, can you take this cup from me, but your will be done, not mine. To know what you're walking into, to know that you're okay with God's will, whatever it may be.
I know.
And it just gives me goosebumps thinking, because you said it's a continual thing. I mean, Jesus didn't just ask once, he asked again and again. And so, like you said, we don't know. I think there's strength in surrendering to his will because we've seen what it's done in our lives, but we don't know what the next 10 years holds. We don't know what the next 20 years holds, but we've seen God's faithfulness
That's right.
in that, in surrendering to his will, to know that whatever storm we may enter, we will get through that one as well. And there's no better place to be. I say it, John says it all the time. I would so much rather be in his will than in mine. Because I don't know. I can't see what he sees. Only he can.
Yeah, and I think that even as raising kids and there's stuff that can kind of come up in life where it's like anxious thoughts about, oh, I don't know what God you're doing and stuff. And it's just so funny because if you just look back on your life and see how God has continually been faithful
So
to provide or to get you past a certain moment, if you just really sit back and just like think about what God has done, he's got you.
He does.
He's got you. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy because Lord knows if you're listening to this podcast, it's probably not been easy, but God's got you. You know, our prayer is that there's healing from addiction with your loved one. If you're listening to this, our prayer is that there's healing from it, but there might not be. There might not be. There might be a continuation of addiction that you're still walking through with your loved one. There might be a death of a loved one from addiction, but God's got you. And so if you just continually pour out your heart and say, God, your will be done. I don't know what you're doing. I just can't figure it out. But know that God's got you.
Yeah.
So
good. When with that comes with stepping into God's will and submitting and surrendering that, it calls for our will to be undone. And so a lot of times what we have in vision, it's kind of like the secondary grief. We have this vision for this life. We have this vision for this marriage or for this father that we want for our children. But sometimes we have to let our will be undone and submit to his will to be done. Yeah. And that's hard. And that does take a process to be like, okay, God, I'm going to trust you every day. And to, I guess, tamper out our will and let his will take over. And that's hard sometimes because we do have this vision, especially as women. We're planners, we're dreamers, where we have this bubble that we want for our lives. And sometimes that's not what God has for us.
That's true.
And it's better some of the times, all the time. His ultimate plan is better. Yeah. And so we may not see it like that in the moment, but God does see it. You know, and I go back to parenting Jasper. There's things that yesterday we were out in the yard and he's playing in poison ivy. Oh, that's good. And so it's all over my leg this morning. Oh no. So I grab him, but he has no idea that he's playing in poison ivy. I see that. He can't. And so sometimes it takes God grabbing us from something, pulling us from something, changing our life projection because he can see what we can't.
I love that. I love that analogy. Sorry that I had to be at the cost of poison ivy, but
it's the story of my life here lately. I know.
As you were talking, a lot of times it means stepping out of your comfort zones. And for me, stepping out of my comfort zone, going to Middle Tennessee was that first big step. Us doing this podcast, if you will.
Another big step.
It was stepping out of our comfort zone. I remember those first couple. It's just like a couple of episodes. We're just going, well, there's a camera in there, just in our face.
Completely uncomfortable.
Here's a microphone. It's fun. Yeah. It's just like God calls you to things, stepping out of your comfort zone and saying, God, I think this is your will. This is what you've kind of leaded and guided us, stirring in our hearts. So I believe it's from you, but I don't want to do it. I don't want to. This is way out of my comfort zone. Yeah. But you find beauty in that when you step out of your comfort zone into his will. So good. It becomes more natural.
It does.
And, that's true. You can see where God is confirming in those decisions.
Yeah. And it's so true about God is not a God of confusion. Yeah. And that's good. It goes back to when Katie and I were deciphering between coming to live here in Middle Tennessee, walking this journey of addiction with our husbands at S2L, there was no confusion whatsoever. And you have your story. I have the story about our house given to, yes. Yeah. There was no confusion. Was it hard to step out of our comfort zone and do something against what the trajectory of what we thought our life was? Yes, it was. I know.
It was hard.
True. But there was no confusion. And that's, I think, where you have to heed to the Holy Spirit and know that if you say yes, he will walk you through. He will let you know how to do it, and he will provide to do it. Yeah. He's not a God of confusion.
One of my other points was, and you might have even mentioned it, so I might be kind of repeating it, but it's fine. Just letting go of the perfect life. The white picket fence. Yep. The mom and the dad and the kids.
It's so good.
It's just letting go and letting God show himself off in your life, right? And I think for addiction, it's very taboo still. And I know for me, when it first came out that Adam had an addiction, it was very hush.
Yes, us too.
And as for most people, just because, it's kind of embarrassing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's embarrassing. It's, it's hard to talk about. And no, it's just so much a part of our life. We talk about it a lot. And I realize as you're listening, you might not be in that place, and I get it. But there's beauty in it not being perfect and letting God fill in those gaps
It's so good.
to be perfect. And so our messiness that we had in our life, it's beauty from ashes, right? It's beauty that he's made. And so just letting go of that idea. And I think as you're listening to this, if you're, a mom or a grandparent or a wife or a husband, and you're like, I mean, but like people might find out. Yeah, they might, and they probably will. And as soon as you do, there's beauty from that because you can start healing. So
that is so powerful. And it's so important because I think majority of us in this journey, whether our side or our loved ones, are like, I don't know. I don't want people to know. And that's how John was at first. Like we told people he was off moving a boat across, which is something he would do.
Right.
But we crossed a threshold of, God, whatever you want to do with our story, do it. Because we also came with the image driven, we have this perfect life and nothing's wrong.
Yeah.
And so when you cross that threshold of surrendering to God, I don't care who knows. I don't care what you do with our story, as long as you get the glory and people are drawn to you, do it.
Amen.
And that's a powerful place to be.
Yeah, I agree. Anything else?
I think that's about it.
Okay. Well, I hope that you found some encouragement today in really surrendering your will to his will, and meaning it, because there's beauty in that, and beauty in just kind of letting go and finding his will and not your will. So read the Bible, find community, go back and listen to some of our other episodes on finding community. It's going to really help you when you're really trying to find God's will.
Yeah.
So I hope you found some encouragement in this podcast. If you are on social medias, make sure you go to Hope After Addiction. We're on Instagram and Facebook. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you like it and subscribe and comment, because we like interaction.
Yes.
And we also really like the comments, because it gives us ideas for our other podcasts. If you're really struggling with something, you can always private message us on Instagram and Facebook. That's where we've gotten actually a couple of these podcasts that we're doing the next couple of weeks. So make sure you do that. We thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you join us next week. We'll see you then.